If you were a cucumber in a salad, how would you be? Welcome to the Work Awesome podcast. This is episode 18, the most difficult questions to ask or be asked in an interview. Today I have Sarah and Megan with me. It is full of recruiters because, well, we want the recruiters' input on this topic. Just to quickly go over the description of this episode, we all have that one question, the one that no matter how much preparation we do, always seems to trip us up. In this episode, we'll reveal our most difficult questions to answer during an interview and look at a few tips to give your best answers no matter what. Before I go any further, if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe. There's 77% of you that are watching the videos but not subscribed, so definitely take that 0.5 seconds and hit the subscribe button right below the video. That way you can get notified of new videos every Tuesday, as well as a lot of new content coming up in the new year. And then if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, or any other audio platform, please follow. Specifically on Apple Podcast, if you're listening, leave a review, leave a rating so that more people can see the podcast and get all of this really great information that we're sharing. So today's all about difficult questions. The icebreaker for this episode is, what is the question that trips you up? What's the most difficult question you've had to answer in the past? For me, it's one that's pretty simple to most people probably, but it's the one that I hate the most, and it's, what's your biggest weakness? I don't know. For me, I'm like, well, that's dumb. I don't want to tell my potential future employer, what my weaknesses are. I want to make myself look good. And by saying like, hey, this is a weakness of mine, it's like, well, does that put a little damper on things for the interviewer? What do you guys think? We'll talk about, on the recruiter side, let's talk about like what that question or what you expect from that question in a minute. But what are your most difficult questions that have been asked?
I would agree with that, Ian. I don't care to answer that question either. So we typically phrase it more like, what are some areas that you'd like to improve on in your professional life? Because I think, we're looking to see how people answer the question as well as their specific answer and kind of what they, a little self-reflection. But I agree. That is my least favorite question to be asked in an interview.
Yeah.
I do agree with that one. The one that this is another simple one that most people would have a quick answer for, but that always is, I hate talking about the money aspect of things. Like when people ask me like, how much do you want to get paid? And I'm like, oh my God. And I want to tell them like what I really want, but at the same time, you want to be realistic and kind of fit into the world. So I think that question always makes me feel so much pressure and I don't know what to say.
Yeah, money is definitely a hard topic to talk about in any situation. And it shouldn't be. And it's always like, the other thought about like money is like, well, if you go into an interview and you don't talk about money, does that just lead you to think like, oh, I'm not getting this job, we didn't talk about money? And it might not be the case. Some companies just might do interviews and the interview process in a different way. So they might talk about money down the road more than during the actual interview. All right, cool. So let's jump in, and I kind of explained this to you offline, but we're just going to go through this list of questions. We put out some feelers on social media. Sarah got a great response on her post, and there's about 15 questions I want to go through, just seeing how you would answer it, or I guess what type of answer you would expect as a recruiter to hear from people. So the first one is, what is your biggest weakness? And now we can talk about like what you expect to hear on the recruiting side as the interviewer, what type of answers you expect to hear from people.
That's hard because I think it's hard to answer. In my experience, what I've heard from people this is the common answer that I hear from people, and I think it works, is that they kind of say that they have a hard time saying no, or that they, and I guess it kind of makes it a good thing almost as a bad thing, because then as a recruiter, we're like, oh, that means they're willing to do so much extra work and take on extra things. So I think hearing that, but for me, it's just straight up honesty. Like if you're not good at working with numbers, I've had interviews before where I'm like, don't make me do math. I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. So if it's obviously realistic, and you don't want to tell them you can't do things that are in your job description, but just being honest with what, makes you uncomfortable or things like that.
Yeah, I would say there's no really correct answer, but I would say the analysis of the answer depends on the job. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if you have a really forward-facing job and you're very shy, then that might lead to a follow-on question. If you say, well, I really don't like talking to people too much, if that's your weakness or something like that, or I'd rather, be in an office by myself where I don't have to do a lot of interaction, then the next follow-on question would be, is that something that you're willing to work on? Is that something that you want to change? Because you're kind of saying, well, is this person really going to be a good fit for this specific position? Maybe they're going to be a great fit for another position where, you're in spreadsheets all day and you really don't interact face to face with a lot of people. You really need to be more focused on that specific task. So that's one of the things that I would say is we're looking when we're doing an interview to see if you're going to be a good fit for the position, because hopefully we really understand the position and we've tried to communicate the position. But there are some things that are more difficult to write on words. So getting that, that interaction with the candidate and really hearing what they have to say is maybe going to be a little bit more of an indication if they're going to be a good fit for the job and for the team that they're going to be working on.
Yeah, the way I answer that question is normally like I procrastinate, and I'm like, well, I procrastinate, but in the long run, everything that I need to get done gets done. It's just that I wait till the last minute to do it, which right. That might not be the best answer. I like to say when I interview, I like black out and just start talking, which not a great thing. Again, I've definitely learned a lot doing these podcasts, and hopefully if I ever interview again in the future, I won't black out anymore.
Well, we're hoping that that's not going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't think that. Doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon, which is also a good thing. All right, so the next question on this list is, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
I think that's a really good question. And for me personally, I like to ask that question because that opens up the world of, are you going to, for one, be here with the company for a while? And for two, do you see yourself moving into different opportunities? Do you see yourself moving throughout the company or up into a management position? And, that helps the manager then be able to decide, like, does this position have potential to eventually become a management role? Do you want to go that direction? So I think that's super easy. And again, it's really all the answers are just being honest. Like, if you truly, know that you're going to be transitioning, then you don't want to be here for too long. Certain positions are going to be okay with that, and we'll be able to take you from that type of position and maybe not another one. So
I agree with you, Megan. I think we're looking at, and one of the things is I feel like we're looking for people who want to be in a path towards, career development and career growth. So we're really assessing, what is this person looking for? Are they just looking for a 9-to-5 job, or are they looking for an opportunity to get into a scenario where they can really, grow and develop, and maybe when they've outgrown the job that they're in, there would be another job ready for them within our company? Is that what they're looking to do? So I think the way they answer that question really kind of gives us an indication of if our company is going to be able to grow the way they want to grow, and if they're going to be able to grow the way we need them to grow in that role.
Yeah, I think this question is important for specifically our company because we are employee owned. So you get a good sense of like, hey, hopefully you did the research to realize that we are employee owned. That means that we maybe not expect it, but we hope that you make the investment in time to stay here long enough. It's going to benefit you in the long run, but also it'll benefit everybody else in the company in the long run too. So definitely good insights there about that question. Number 3, think of your best coworker. What traits make them such a strong team member? So that's an interesting one because it's asking not about you, but about, I guess, what you admire in somebody else.
I don't think I've ever been asked that question. But I guess, people would ask that question just for the simple fact of, I think what you admire, what you look up to, a lot of times what you try to mirror and what you want to try to become and do. So I think if you say this person's good with communicating and they're good with getting their work in on time and not procrastinating or whatever the case is that you're saying, I think that just kind of shows maybe the footsteps that you're going to follow in, or if you're not there yet, where do you want to be? Where do you see yourself taking it?
Definitely, Megan. I agree with that. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, we're also looking to see, because in most jobs, you're going to be working with a team. So is this going to be an environment, if those things that Megan just talked about, if those are the things that are really evident in the team that you're going to be working with, then that's probably a really good sign. If you answer the question that you really want to work with someone who's super quiet and basically leaves you alone, and it's a very collaborative team, that might be a problem. Whereas in some positions, maybe that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, I think this also goes back to like being not self-absorbed, I guess, and like realizing what other people bring to a team.
Right.
So yeah, I think that there's a lot that an interviewer could get out of that question by the way somebody answers it. Maybe jot that one down and ask it in the next interview. 4, what do you do to promote diversity? That one's also an interesting one, and I feel like it's probably becoming more of a question that's being asked because a lot of workplaces are trying to promote diversity, which is obviously really important. What do you guys think?
So if I was answering that question, I think, obviously it would really depend on your position. So a recruiter, we have to do that. That's something that we absolutely have to do.
Yeah.
Engineers, I mean, different positions may not need to really care about that as much, but I think a lot of it is just networking too. Like, is your LinkedIn profile up to date? Are you able to use your social media or just find different groups where there's different groups of people that you can find that will help expand that diversity aspect of the company. So I think, if I was answering it as a recruiter, I would say just being able to network and find the right groups of people.
Yeah.
And then I think that question is asked because it's for, I guess, to kind of see how open-minded you are to finding different types of people and different groups and being able to work with different people too.
Yeah, I agree with that, Megan. I think, in our role, we do have a good, we have the ability to really source for diversity the best that we can. And I think as a hiring manager, you have that as well. But as a teammate, you have the opportunity to be open-minded to diversity of all different types, and to understand that diversity and maybe different experiences, different life experience really can add depth and value to your team. So I think that there is a role in that for everyone within the company, depending upon the methodology that you're able to engage with diversity. But I think, being open-minded, really looking to bring, different levels to your team, different gifts, different experiences, different talents. There's definitely a place to add diversity and support diversity for everyone within a company.
Yeah, I think this is another one of those questions where like you get a lot by the answer the person gives because there's tons of way that you could answer that question. There's diversity in age and gender and all types of things. The first thing that popped into my mind is like, okay, maybe I would talk about my willingness to mentor younger people so that you're diversifying the age of the company. But I definitely think that question has a lot of different answers that people can give, and it's going to give you a really great insight into who they are and what they can bring to a team.
Well, and Ian, you could even have the opportunity to mentor, someone who hasn't had the technology experience that you've had, so that kind of brings a whole nother element to them too. So there's different ways that I think our younger generation of workers can also mentor, people who maybe started working with different technology, a different generation of technology than we have now. So I think that knowledge sharing is, consistent throughout companies, and it really does add value to the team I think that's unique in our technology field right now, that we have that ability, because there is, we have people who maybe started working with a whole different level of technology, but they have this great knowledge set, but now they can use that knowledge set with some of the technology that maybe the younger generation who's coming out of schools have, and really make the team a much more efficient, engaged team.
Yes. I'm like moving around questions on my list because I want to clump some together.
Are we taking too long? Are we too chatty, Ian?
No, not at all. There are some hard ones on here, and I know that we'll be able to answer them as one big question. So I just want to make sure we're not spending too much time on the weird questions. The next one on this list is, do you like working? Which could be considered a weird question. I hope that everyone's answer is yes, but I could see where people might answer this question in different ways. I assume that people might talk about like their family time and what they expect to do outside of work. What do you think about this one? Because this is, like I said, it's a simple one, but it can give you a lot of detail about someone's thought process.
I think this one, for me, when I heard it, one of the things that comes to my mind is just, you could answer this from an initiative standpoint. Like, where do you, obviously like doing your job, but how committed are you to kind of taking on other things and figuring out other solutions and things like that? Because you can just do your 9 to 5, but if you even doing your 9 to 5, if you find something in there that needs to be done, a new project or something that needs to be done, are you dedicated to doing that work? And I've had people who have answered questions similar to that, who are like, oh, my wife had to kick me off the internet, at a certain time because I genuinely like working and I like what I'm doing. And I think that speaks a lot to Ian yesterday's episode about the passion. If you find something you're passionate about, then it's really not work, and you're able to put so much more effort and time into those projects or those things that need to be done.
I agree with that, Megan. I think that's well said. I think we're looking to see, is your job, where does your job fit? Where does work fit into your life? So, and I think that's just a way to understand kind of the mental approach to working. So like I said, I don't think there's a wrong answer to that.
No.
But it does kind of give you an idea of what type of employee you're bringing into the position.
Yeah, I have no idea how I would answer that question. My first thought is like, yeah, I like working. And then my second thought is like, well, what does that say to the interviewer? I guess I would go into, it sounds like there's a plane flying above us right now, or a jet of some sort. We'll wait for that to pass. So we are right outside of an airbase, which is why we have jets every once in a while. They say, what's the saying? The sound of freedom down here.
Yep.
So, yeah, I know. I guess the way that I would answer this question is like just by talking about the investment I'm willing to make through my work, like you guys were talking about. Okay, so the next question is, how do you deal with conflict? This one's interesting. If I was on the interviewee side, I'd be interested as to why the interviewer was asking this question, because then it's like, well, has there been times where there's conflict in this job? That is my first thought with that. What do you guys think about that question?
I think that conflict can, I think maybe that's an extreme word, but I think that could be anything, any issue that you run into, whether it's communication problems or, things not getting done in a timely manner, whatever the case may be. But I think from that aspect, it really just shows, like, for one, are you going to run immediately to the highest person in the company to talk about this? Or you have problem-solving skills that you can kind of figure out with yourself? Do you know how to communicate with people? And then at what point do you think, hey, this maybe needs to go over to management or to our leadership and things like that? So I think that really just speaks to what you're capable of and what you're used to when it comes with anything. And I think you can also speak a lot to just conflict in general. It doesn't even really need to be in the workplace, but this shows how you handle things. Are you quick to anger? Or are you quick to, like I said, run to somebody else to talk about it? So I think I think this is a good question that a lot of us do ask. And again, it just really kind of helps us figure out where you're going to fit in. If you're going into a team that's very timid and quiet and, maybe you're not that type of person, it may be intimidating and it may be hard for you to fit into that team versus the opposite of that.
Yeah, and I would say many of these types of questions, they're looking, as Megan mentioned, kind of for your processing, how you're, how you take something and roll with it, essentially. But they're also looking for your critical thinking. Conflict in a team can be really good. It can be a really powerful force to change too. So I think they're looking for, have you had experience with conflict? Are you just coming out of maybe your training or your school and you really haven't had exposure to that? Or, have you had experiences in dealing with change management or conflict professionally? And this might really be a way that you can add value to the team.
Yeah, I guess that makes a lot of sense to me. The one thing I guess to always remember, and you hit on it, Sarah, is to always talk about like your previous experiences and how maybe you've dealt with conflict in the past. Like if you ever get stuck, be like, oh, well, here's a story that relates to this question. I do that in my interviews and it's gone well for me.
I think that's how most interviews ask it nowadays too. I think that's even where it says it's like, tell us the time you dealt with conflict in the workplace.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes people don't have to have a great deal of professional experience to have a great answer to that.
Right.
Maybe you've been an RA as a young, someone who's just out of college. Maybe you're an RA. Well, I can only imagine the conflicts that you've probably dealt with. And there might have been some where you've had to deal with leadership or, a student's parents or just a group of students themselves. And maybe you didn't know exactly what was going on, but you had to sort it out. That's a great experience, even if you haven't ever had a real job before.
Yeah. And even it could be as simple as talking about a time where you were doing like a group, if I could talk, a group project, and there was some sort of conflict during that.
Sure,
that time
absolutely.
Too. All right. So the next question, what improvements can you see yourself bring to the, let me reword that. What improvements can you see yourself bringing to this group in the next year? So that one is talking again about kind of like longevity. And I guess to me, it's like the 100-day plan. Like, what do you expect to do in your first year with working at this company or part of this team that you're trying to join?
I think this is just a really good opportunity to kind of humbly brag about yourself in a way.
Yeah.
You can talk about your strengths and maybe it is something that somebody else has on the team. Like I think Sarah and I, since we're on the same team, we have a lot of the same strengths, but we also have completely different strengths and different aspects of things too. So it obviously helped us match up during the interview process, but I think that, even now there's some things that she does way better than me and there's some things that I do better, or we just have different ways of figuring things out. So I think this is a really good opportunity for you to kind of touch base on your communication skills or on your graphic design or whatever you're going in for. Just kind of share your experiences and what you're good at and also what you enjoy, because if this is something that maybe you haven't, like Sarah said, had a big job or an official job or something like that in the world of where you're trying to get into, maybe just talk about what you enjoy. And, if you want to start doing more training or you want to get certifications or school and you want to be able to expand and learn more about the world that you're going into, I think that's also an opportunity to share those things too.
Absolutely. I mean, when we're, like I said, a couple times previously, we're looking for someone who's going to join a team. Usually you're not hiring a one-person team. So we're looking at, how collaborative are you? What do you view as your strengths? What are you willing to provide essentially to that job? And sometimes this is an opportunity for you to bring things up that really haven't come up in the interview before and maybe aren't on the resume. The resume is what we're seeing, when people apply and the answers to the application questions. But these types of questions are an opportunity for you to bring life to your experiences and to, how you work as a team and what type of employee you are. So this is probably should be one of your favorite questions.
Yes.
Because this is an opportunity to say, and sometimes I think if there isn't a right answer, but this gives a great kind of insight into what you're going to bring to the team, what you're willing to, like I said before. And just because you give an answer that maybe the interviewers are like, that might not be a great fit for this team, that answer might be a great fit for another team.
Yeah.
But I definitely would say make sure it's relevant, because I've had some interviews in the past where I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, oh, I moved into my new house and built a bathroom. And I'm like, okay, great. Unless you're like, what are you trying to do here? So, I mean, that's cool.
That's a great point, Megan.
Yeah. I definitely think this is a place for you to just, like you said, do that humble bragging and talk about what you plan to do for that team. The next question on my list is the one that Megan brought up at the very beginning. What salary are you looking for? And I don't want you guys to answer this. If you're listening to this, I want you to go back to episode 4 of the Work Awesome podcast, which is negotiating salary, and listen to that podcast, because it will give you a lot of details on how to answer that question and how to negotiate salary appropriately. So not to take away anyone's thunder on that question, but let's plug an episode if we can. The next 4 questions are the weird questions. And let's just jump into them, I guess. Sarah, you were talking about this in the office the other day. Why are manhole covers round? I don't even know where I would begin to answer that question. So feel free to jump in with your answers.
I think that is a question, again, that is more relevant to the position. I don't see somebody asking me that as a recruiter. And if you did, I'd be like, okay, I don't know. That's how they made it, okay? But I think, maybe an engineer or maybe somebody in that world who that's relevant in some way to them. I think that just shows how your mind works, and maybe the depth of it too. Like how far back are you going to go with this? Like, are you going to want to research it? What are you trying to, how are you trying to answer it? I guess is dependent upon what you do, but I can definitely see like a different people in different careers answering it differently. Yeah. So again, I don't think it would be asked at most interviews, but I think it really just is to kind of pick your brain and see where you go with it.
Yep.
So I don't think that's a wrong answer.
Yeah, I think this could be a common interview question in a technical position, maybe especially more of an entry level technical position. Some of it's going to be like, do you actually know the answer? And some of it's going to be how you approach the answer.
Yeah, I think this has a lot to do with like Megan was saying, like critical thinking, and I definitely see where this could be like a very technical question. So definitely a weird one. But if you're on that tech side, don't be surprised if you have to answer that question. And hopefully you know the answer. Look it up after this, because I don't know why. I mean, there's some.
You shouldn't be giving the right answers anyway, Ian.
That's true. All right, the next one apparently has been asked in our company a while ago to a few people. If you were a cucumber in a salad, how would you be? And that is apparently exactly how it's asked or posed. How would you be?
There you answer. You were eating cucumbers yesterday.
I was eating cucumbers yesterday, and I love cucumbers. And the funny thing is, my favorite way to eat cucumbers is not in a salad; it's just plain, because they're just so delicious. It might depend on my mood, maybe a little bit, how I would answer this question. Right.
I think it's one of those like just kind of. I was talking to Tara a little bit before this episode, and she was saying it was used as like kind of like an icebreaker question.
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
You sit down and like that's your first question, so that like opens the interview for you, and it gets you to start to thinking a little bit differently and just open up a bit. But
Sure.
I guess the way that she answered the question was that she would be fancy. And then she went into all these details of like what makes a fancy cucumber, and just I guess it actually threw off her interviewers, which is interesting.
Yeah.
But definitely, I think one of those just fun questions that kind of open
Well,
an
and
interview.
that's the thing, Ian. It's okay to have fun and laugh during an
Mhm.
interview. I mean, you want to keep it under control and keep it relevant,
Yes.
but it's okay to, we do, as we've mentioned in prior podcasts, we do want our interviewees to be comfortable. And I know every company has a different approach. We don't want to make our interviewers uncomfortable or unless it's not the right position for them and they're really, kind of out of place in that position. And then it's not that we want them to be uncomfortable, but maybe we're realizing that it's not a great fit, which doesn't mean they wouldn't be a great fit for another job. But it's okay. I mean, you're trying to make a connection. That piece of paper that you've sent through the application process, that resume, that application, it's very flat. So you're trying to make an impression. You want the interviewer to remember the brilliance that you had during that interview, the fun, like how comfortable you were during that process. So I think that's important to keep in mind with all of these questions.
Can I start asking that question?
I don't see why not.
That's what I'm gonna do. I'm not going to tell my managers, and they're going to be like, "What the heck?"
Okay, I want a video of their expressions.
Maybe we just make a video asking just that question and see how people answer it. That would be fun.
Do it.
Let's jot that down as an idea.
Let's do it.
All right. The next question, and one that has been asked a few times in our company: how would you fly a helicopter full of peanuts? Again, one of those fun questions. I think it just lets you as the interviewer get an insight onto how people kind of think.
Yeah,
Sarah?
I think that opens up questions like, I think, Ian, I heard you saying it the other day to somebody, but is it like an unmanned, thing?
Right.
Is somebody in there? Is there room for me to sit? Like, just more critical thinking. So I think it kind of expands more how you think just for that.
Sarah, have you ever been part of an interview that has involved that question, or is that?
No, I
okay.
haven't. Yeah, I guess I haven't been here long enough for that one.
Apparently there were a few people, actually Laura, who's been on the podcast, was asked that during her interview, and apparently she had a really, really great answer.
I can imagine she would have a brilliant answer. I would need to know what kind of peanuts.
Yeah, there's a lot of like follow-on questions, but
Yeah.
I think the point of that question is that the interviewer doesn't give you any more detail. It's just like,
Right.
there's a helicopter full of peanuts. How would you fly it?
I love
And like
peanuts.
for like a pilot, it's like, well, how heavy does that make the helicopter? Is it
Yeah,
even possible to
exactly.
fly it? But for like
Right.
me, a creative person, I'm like, well, could I just sit in the seat and fly it? I mean, that's
Yeah.
not super creative, but like I'll squish in there with all the peanuts around me and fly it. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Maybe another one to bring back and start asking people. Maybe we make another separate video out of that one. And then the final question, it wasn't quite 15. I took some off because they were pretty much related to some of the other questions that we had. So the final question, which makes 12 questions for this whole episode: why do you think that we park in driveways and drive on parkways? So another one where you're just kind of like, I guess just like getting that thought process again. What type of process do you go through to think of an answer for that type of question?
I think there's a lot of things like that, though.
Yes.
I don't even remember. There's a ton of them. Like, why do we do this? But this is, I can't remember. There was a whole bunch of those. And I think that's just an icebreaker or two. Again, just to kind of see how you think. And then I think in those instances too, I think that an interviewer could really use that to see, like, do you rebuttal back by asking questions
Right.
that you don't know an answer to? Like, that shows that you're going to ask questions when you don't know how to do your job.
I guess my other question with this one is like, is there a correct answer? Like, could I potentially actually know the answer to this question and then just really impress my interviewer?
Well, Ian, you're supposed to drive on the driveway and park in the garage.
True. Very true. I guess, yep, that throws me off. I don't know what else to add to that question now. All right, let's wrap this one up. We've gone for well over 30 minutes. Thank you guys for joining me today on the next episode, which we actually recorded before this episode, but that's a whole thing. On the next episode, we're talking about finding your passion. The description reads, fuel for the fire. Our passion ignites our creativity and drives us to be the best that we can be. If your job isn't igniting your passion, it might be time to look elsewhere. In this episode, we'll discuss how we unleash our passion in the work that we do and how you can too. Once again, if you are watching this on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. Like I mentioned, there's 77% of you that are watching the videos but are not subscribed. So definitely hit that subscribe button so you're notified every week of new episodes, as well as new content. It sounds like we have some videos coming out with a couple of these fun questions in the future. And if you're listening on all of the audio platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, any other audio platform, definitely hit the follow button and get notified of new episodes every week. So once again, Sarah, Megan, thank you for joining me. This was a fun one, and I will see everybody next time.
Thanks, Ian.
The Work Awesome podcast is brought to you by Avian. Avian is a 49% employee-owned company founded by retired U.S. Navy test pilots who believe passion and talent are the right traits to get the job done. Avian operates in a culture that thrives on innovation, creativity, and the entrepreneurial spirit. Instead of offering services through mere business transactions, Avian is redefining the government services industry by creating meaningful experiences and connecting talented people with important work. The passion that Avian's employees have for its work builds better partnerships for the future, and Avian's unique talents create real solutions. At Avian, we move fast, take risks, and don't settle for the status quo. To learn more, visit Avian's website at avian.com. That's avian.com.